So these are our co-founders. This is Travis Kalanick and Garrett Camp. And they had a simple idea. They were in Paris in 2009. They were there for a tech conference. And they were walking through the streets. And they had an idea that was really inspired out of need. They thought, this is not a great way to get a taxi. It's snowing, it's cold outside. Imagine how amazing it would be if we could sit in the comfort of our hotel room and tap a button and get a ride. Both are engineers by way of background, and they went back to San Francisco and they developed the Uber application. It started off really as a cool way for Travis and Garrett and a couple of their friends to get around the city. Very slowly, though, people started to notice them getting around, tapping their phones, a car pulling up, and them getting in. And they wanted really to be part of this Uber application. So in June 2010, the Uber application was launched. It started off in San Francisco. So this is what San Francisco looked like from an Uber perspective in early 2010, about 6 trips going on. So that idea started to spread. An intern actually said to the guys, let's take this to the east coast of the US. So they did exactly that. Operations expanded, and they launched in Boston. And at the same time, we launched our first international operations in Paris. From there, we expanded again in 2012, and we launched our first South African city in August 2013. Something which I'm very proud of is that South Africa was the first country outside the US for Uber where we had 3 cities operational at the same time. So it just shows you how large we think the opportunity is here today. That expansion continued quite rapidly in 2014 and 2015. And today, we're in over 340 cities around the world and over 60 countries. To put that number into context, when Johannesburg was launched, we were the 34th city globally. So that's 10 times more cities in just over 2 years. So why did this all happen? And I think the reason why this happened is because we questioned the status quo. What you'll see over here is a taxi medallion. And that costs about $1 million. And the reason for that is because traditionally speaking, people thought that caps on transport licenses meant that drivers could earn more and that riders would be better off. In fact, we've seen there have been a number of unintended consequences. The first being that you're not being picked up by a Ferrari, you're getting picked up by a yellow cab. Yet, if someone wants to have the right to do that, they need to lay down $1 million. So that's meant that these medallions are owned by a small number of people, and drivers rent these out at really crazy rates. What it also means is that when you really need a ride, you can't get it because taxi is unreliable, especially in underserved areas. And prices are also higher because there are a few number of cars on the road, so they can really charge whatever they want. At Uber, we think about that quite differently. We think that more licensed supply is better for drivers and better for riders. And we think that because if you think about that rider experience, if you think about opening up the application and see a 15-minute wait time, and you see that reduced to 10 minutes to 5 minutes or less, you're going to be more and more likely to actually request a trip. And as that way of thinking changes, and as you learn to rely on that system, more supply actually means more demand. And it actually takes traditional economics and turns it completely on its head. The next thing to think about is how drivers spend their time online on the Uber platform. So drivers can really be doing one of 3 things. They can be waiting for a pickup, they can be driving to pick up a passenger, or they can be carrying a fare-paying passenger to their destination. And if you think about those 3 things, they're only making money in the 3rd scenario. So everything we do, we think about how can we minimize the amount of time that they spend waiting for a pickup. That's idle time. If they're online, they want to work. How can we minimize the number of kilometers that they travel to pick up a customer? Those are already dead kilometers. And how can we maximize the time carrying fare-paying passengers? And despite conventional thinking, what we've seen is that lower prices actually mean higher earnings. And if we take New York as an example again, if you look at the average UberX price in New York from 2014 to 2012, it decreased by over 30%. Despite that, we saw driver earnings increase. And that's because demand was higher for the product, it was more affordable, It meant drivers were spending less time waiting for a trip. It meant that drivers were spending less time, dead kilometers driving to pick people up, and more time carrying fare-paying passengers. And that works. The results are there. That's what New York City looks like pretty much end of 2014. And what you can see is that there's pretty much a car on every piece of road in Manhattan. And that means in an average of roughly 3 minutes, you can get that reliable ride when you need it. And in South Africa, we're at an average of 5 minutes or less across all cities. And look, that disruption hasn't happened without its challenges. We've seen our fair share of pushback from taxi. It's not about taxi or Uber, it's about taxi and Uber, and hopefully we are making progress there. We've seen pushback from a regulatory perspective. And something which always blows my mind is a regulation in South Korea which stated that it was actually illegal for a local to request an Uber and get in that car. If you were a foreigner visiting South Korea and you wanted to use Uber, that was okay. But if you're a local, it was a problem. So Uber was actually banned there. But if the idea is good enough and you don't give up and you persevere, the best ideas win. And we are relaunching the product in South Korea. And after a while, you start to make an impact on your city. And part of the reason why I'm proud to be part of Uber is the impact that we're having on driver partners like Esther. She was one of the first partners in Nairobi. She was previously a meter taxi driver who worked for a large company in Nairobi. She was working very long hours, and she wasn't really able to spend time with her family. When Uber launched, she managed to save up some money. She purchased her own vehicle. She's now loving life because she's earning more. She manages her own time, and she's building her own fleet. And her story is not unique. We are partnering with thousands of partner drivers like Esther across the continent. And we're very committed to ensuring that that number will be over 15,000 by the beginning of 2017. And you also start to create this public transport system in your city. This is a map of Lagos. And what the blue dot shows you is a unique position where a unique user opened up the application for the first time. And I know a lot of people think that Uber's limited to the more affluent areas, but that's not the case. There's demand everywhere. It's not just Lagos Island or VI. It's on the mainland. And people now have access in Lagos traffic to safe, reliable rides in an average time of less than 7 minutes. And you start connecting people to their cities. This is a map of Johannesburg, and hopefully you can see the blue line. And what that blue line is, was as of April 2014, trips that had happened in the city. You can see there's a hub around Sandton, another hub around Rosebank in the CBD. And what that meant, it meant that over 1 million trips were booked on the platform in 2014. If we look at that same map in February 2015, it's a different story. And we're starting to connect Joburg to Joburgers. It's easier for people to get around their city. There is an alternative to car ownership. And from a growth perspective, that's meant that over 2 million trips were booked on the platform just in the first half of 2015. And if you take that to the next level and you think about a product that we have called Uber Pool, Uber Pool matches people who are leaving from similar starting points and landing up at similar destinations using technology. So what that means, as a rider, your cost of your trip is lower. Yes, there may be a slight detour to pick up the person, but your cost of ride will be probably half the price. As a driver, if we go back to the 3 things they can be doing, demand is now going to be much higher because the cost of the product is a lot lower. They're going to spend less time waiting for a pickup. They're going to be picking up a person, getting paid, picking up another person, so there's less time driving to pick up someone with no one in your car not earning money. And there's more time on the platform earning. And from a city perspective, it means that there's less congestion because instead of 2 cars carrying 2 people, we now have 1 car carrying 2 or 3 or 4 people. So one thing that's important to remember is that you always need to ask what the next big disruption opportunity is. And for us, one of those are push a button and get a burger. It's Uber Eats. So imagine that within minutes, you could push a button and a burger or a pizza is delivered to you all through your card on file. And the early results here are showing that the restaurants that we're partnering with, and we're doing this in the US, are doing more revenue through the Uber application than they are through their traditional brick and mortar restaurant. So if you start to think about the need for a shop front and the cost that goes into that, it's actually unnecessary. Make your food, do what you do best, and let Uber connect you to your client base. And what about it if you take that and you apply it to the delivery industry? Once you have that network, the opportunities are really endless. So just my final thought in closing is, if you're not thinking about disrupting yourself, trust me, someone else is, because the disruption will never end. Thank you very much.